A bunch of you have been asking me to check out the My Little Fungus Infection AU created by Marmar.the.imp, and this one has a nice twist to it. I like that many of the characters are aged up, so for example, we get to see the Cutie Mark Crusaders as teenagers. And also, I think that the artwork here is really good, but just like all these Infection AUs, it is not a happy story, so fair warning. Now, I want to start off by actually talking about what the infection is, and we can learn a lot about it from looking at patient 0. Apparently, she ended up going to the hospital for a checkup because she thought that her allergies were flaring up, but after examining her, the doctor sent her straight to the emergency room. But no matter what the doctors actually tried, the symptoms just got worse and worse until eventually they had to call Princess Twilight, thinking that maybe her magic would be able to help them here. But it seems like not even that helped, because as they continued to monitor this pony, they saw that the first week she became like incoherent and stopped eating. After 2 months, she became very aggressive and completely lost her ability to speak. But before she got to that point, she did reveal that in her home garden, she found some tomatoes that were covered in mold. And while she threw most of the bad ones away, she didn't get rid of all of them, and she actually ended up eating a corrupted tomato. And just to kind of nerd out a little bit, even if she did get rid of all the moldy ones, mold can kind of like spread through the air, so even though she may not have seen the mold on the tomatoes, that doesn't mean that a little bit like didn't get on it anyway. And with this new information, the doctors are now concerned that this mold may not just be spreading through the garden, but throughout Ponyville in general. And if that wasn't bad enough, this pony also has a teenage son that may be infected as well. And of course, we found out that this kid is in high school right now, and he's dating Sweetie Belle, which is why we see this email basically stating that she's going to be taken out of school for a bit, just in case she may be contagious. And if all that wasn't bad enough, since patient 0 is also a daycare assistant, depending on how this virus spreads, she may actually have infected a bunch of baby ponies as well. Next, we get to see the actual stages of the infection, with stage 1 starting off feeling like normal allergies, but then the ponies will actually start to cough up blood, lose their appetite, and develop stomach cramps. Stage 2 is where things start to really go downhill with extreme weight loss, loss of magic, and even the ability to fly. This is also where we see them start to vomit out this black ichor. Stage 3 is where the ponies get their appetites back, but now all they want to eat is other ponies. They become super aggressive and can no longer actually speak, and their body is covered in hives while also slowly decaying. Stage 4 is basically the same, but the decay rate is increased, meaning that saving them now is probably impossible. Stage 5 is the final stage, and here we see that they get larger and they're covered in mold and fungus, and while they lose some of their eyesight and hearing, their sense of smell is basically like a bloodhound. And that is how they hunt their prey now. The only good news here is that the sense of smell is a pretty easy one to work around. Ponies can cover themselves in mud or really anything to mask their scent, so hopefully that means that we'll actually have a ton of survivors in this AU. In the next scene, we get to see what's going on at the high school, and to no surprise, Sweetie Belle isn't there. And while Lily Moon doesn't think that it's a big deal, Apple Bloom reveals that Sweetie has never been this sick before. And with this knowledge, Moon, Bloom, and Scoot all get together after school so that they can go check on her. But once the trio actually gets to Sweetie's house, they see that it's surrounded by ponies in hazmat suits, and the house has been covered inside of like a bubble to make sure nothing gets inside or outside of the house. And seeing this, Moon and Bloom think that it's best to just leave, but Scoot wants to investigate, telling her friends that she'll catch up with them later. And while Moon and Bloom both know that Scoot is about to get into some trouble, there isn't like really anything they can do to stop her, so they just head back to their respective houses as well. And I find it kind of cute that these two seem to be crushing on each other a little bit. Now, when Moon makes it home, he immediately crashes out on the bed, but before he can really fall asleep, he hears some tapping at the window. And then we see Scoot climb through, and she looks terrified and a little beat up. And while she's having a hard time getting the words out, it seems like something happened while she was in Sweetie's home, and we even see that one of her legs is wounded pretty badly. In the next chapter, Scoot reveals to Moon that she didn't actually go home after they split up, but rather snuck into Sweetie's house. We also see that one of the ponies in a hazmat suit is actually Rarity, who is acting as the head researcher for this outbreak. And while we see here that most of her stats are pretty good, we can see that her stress level is almost maxed out, and she has also burned out her horn, so magic will definitely not be an easy fix in this AU. Now, back over with Scoot's flashback, we see that she fully entered the house, and then she spots this pony that looks like she's been torn up, and by looking in the comments here, we learn that this is actually the mother of Rarity and Sweetie Belle. Scoot is rightfully freaked out when she sees the body, and since she was so distracted, she didn't hear Sweetie Belle sneaking up behind her until she called her name. Now, back in the present time, we see Moon manages to get Scoot wrapped up, but she refuses to actually go to the doctor and get checked out because she's afraid that she'll get into trouble. But after some back and forth, Lily manages to get her to go home and tell her aunts what actually happened. But something goes wrong on the walk home, and now Scoot has gone missing. And the next morning, we see Rainbow Dash flying around, asking about where she could be. But of course, no one actually knows. In the next chapter, we see that the Equestria officials have to put out a national emergency because hiding this virus from the public is not viable anymore. And the alert says, Ponyville, Canterlot, Western Equestria, and Cloudsdale. These areas and surrounding cities are under lockdown and the borders are closed and quarantined. Ponies, please remain calm. A virus named Neoenteria, recently discovered by the Ponyville medical team, is spreading. The virus is caused by mold, and if you spot mold in your home, local park, or garden, call the number below. Remain home and stay away from the infected. After that, we get a PSA that goes over the symptoms, but more importantly, tells ponies how to protect themselves. And this includes keeping your home clean, wearing a face mask, and reporting any mold that you find. We also see that mold can be in the home, kind of just like how humans can get black mold in their house sometimes. We see that it can also grow like on trees, inside of fruit, in the soil, and animals can even carry it in their teeth if they've like eaten something that it was infected. And in all honesty, this is probably the closest virus that we have to the actual Last of Us virus, especially because mold lets off spores, which means that the ponies are probably in more danger than they even realize. The next chapter is called Meeting, and here we see Twilight has fallen asleep while reading over some research papers, when we see Spike actually come in to let her know that Fluttershy and Zecora are here to see her. And I just want to take a moment to point out that I love Zecora's design in this AU. She looks fantastic. Now, when the ladies all sit down to have tea, we learn that Twilight has called them so that she can actually get help in dealing with this mold, especially because they both have herbalist backgrounds. But before they get into a lot of detail, we then cut over to a bunch of ponies gathering at City Hall in order to get some information from Mayor Lemonheart. And while she is trying to reassure all the ponies, it has become clear that this outbreak is really getting out of control, with many parents losing their children. Back over with Twilight, we see that she has teleported her crew over to the hospital, and while she's able to pull this off, we can tell that it wasn't easy for her, even giving her a slight headache. And I think that this is supposed to highlight again that a lot of ponies are losing their ability to use magic. Now, as the three of them are heading over to the head doctor, Zecora and Shy keep trying to get more information from Twilight, but she's acting really dodgy about their questions. That is until they make it to the research room. Once there, the doctor reveals that they have no information about this mold, almost as if it's magical and not something from nature. And while Zecora seems to be handling things pretty well, Shy is freaked out almost immediately when she actually sees what this mold is doing to some of the ponies. And I think that the pony that she sees specifically is either Sweetie Belle or her mother, and this is why she just runs out of the hospital and then takes flight. And while I know that this is a serious moment, I find it kind of funny that she flies straight home and just jumps right into bed, not even taking time to say anything to Discord or her little rabbit buddy here. And as we can see, she's basically just having a hard time believing that any of this is real. And she's also wondering why Twilight took so long to tell the ponies how bad this outbreak has gotten. And since we know that magic doesn't seem to be effective, I wonder if even Discord will be strong enough to do anything in this AU. Now, after that scene, we cut back over to Zecora, and we see that she's working along Dr. Stable, and while they're examining the mold, it seems like they get the mold to react to something that the doctor did, but it's hard to actually tell what's happening. It just looks like the mold is moving to the right. And before we can actually see what caused this, the chapter just ends abruptly. In the next chapter, we cut over to Rarity, and we see that at some point she received a message from Sweetie Belle, likely before she was infected, basically just updating her about her life. But Rarity has gotten worried because she hasn't heard from her sister in a while, which makes sense considering that, she's in the hospital now. Rarity also received a letter from Twilight telling her to come back to Ponyville immediately, letting her know that her family was in trouble, but not actually giving her any of the details. When she arrives back in town, we see Pinkie meets her at the station, and as they're making their way to a hotel, because of course Rarity's home is still under quarantine, Rainbow Dash actually meets up with them. And after the girls fill Rarity in all the crazy things that have happened while she was out of town, she asks the girls if they'll actually stay the night with her because she could really use some friends right now. But later that night, after Rainbow passed out, we see that Rarity gets a call from Fluttershy, and she reveals what has happened to her sister and the fact that Rarity's mother has already died. Which, if you look back at this letter, Twilight again did not mention this. And this is why Rarity is so ticked off here, and she heads off to give Twilight a piece of her mind. In the next chapter, we get access to a database that has information about a bunch of ponies, but it's kind of weird how it fits in the timeline. I also find it interesting that it feels like a lot of ponies are hiding their activities from others. And to put a point on that, the first person that we see is Twilight, and for the most part, we know that she has been hiding a lot of details about how bad the outbreak is from the other ponies. But one new thing that we get to see here is that her age has been confirmed to be 24 at the moment. Applejack is the next pony that we see, and she seems to be a part of the team that Twilight has created, and she's acting as like the muscle and also a scout. And she even has this special suit that was created by Rarity, but I'm not sure if Rarity knew why she was creating it. And while this suit does offer a lot of protection, she still has a few scars from battles with the infected. After that, we see Rainbow Dash, who's also a scout, but I don't think that she's working with AJ. We see that her suit is full metal, and it wasn't made by Rarity. And since she's basically been flying around completely covered in metal, she's gotten super strong, at least physically. We also see Pinkie Pie's notes, and while she may not be considered one of the strongest ponies, apparently she's been taking out infected in the shadows using her speed and this pistol. And looking at her stats, it seems like Pinkie is actually thriving in this AU. And just like with Rainbow Dash, she seems to be working independently of whatever team AJ and Twilight has come up with. And last we have Shy and Rarity, but since we already know what's going on with Flutter, we'll go ahead and look at Rarity, and we see that she was actually stuck in Canterlot for a while, and we don't know what she was doing, but we can assume that she was maybe making clothes for the royalty there. But this explains why she wasn't actually in Ponyville when the outbreak started getting really bad. Based on this sheet, it looks like she ends up joining the sanitation team and being like a fashion designer, but I think that happens later on in the series. And honestly, I'm just happy to see that all the main ponies are still alive and unaffected at this point, because that never really happens in these AUs. Usually at least Twilight is gone at this point. Now back in the main story, the night that Rarity started heading over to confront Twilight, there was a show going on at the Ponyville High School. And we see Lyra, Bonbon, AJ, and a few other ponies showing up to support either their kids or their students. And in the crowd, we see Berry Shine is wearing a face mask, and she says that she needs to go to the restroom. And when we zoom in here, we can see that not only does she look terrified, but you can see dark veins popping out of her body. In the next scene, we see Bonbon tell Lyra that she also needs to go to the restroom, and Lyra stays behind because she wants to record their two adopted children, Adam and Barnabas, I believe. And while that's happening, we see Zecora and Dr. Stable run into the school and let AJ know that they have a huge problem, and we can assume that it has something to do with what they discovered in the lab. And just as a side note here, I love that Marmar actually drew James OC into this chapter. And for those of you that may not be familiar, I think he's one of the YouTubers that really started out doing specifically My Little Pony content, although he may have kind of branched out since then. Now by chance, Bonbon and AJ end up in the hallway at the same time, and Bonbon hears some crunching sounds coming from the bathroom. And when she opens the door, we see Berry Shine is munching on this pony who I think is Sea Swirl. And it seems like it's too late to save her. And to no surprise, Bonbon is shocked at what she's seeing, and she lets out a scream. And since AJ and the doctor are still in the building, they hear her and they rush over. And when they burst through the door, they see Bonbon with her back hooves covered in gore, showing that she had kicked Berry Shine and she clocked out. And for the people who may not know, a full-grown horse has a lot of power in their kicks, like 2,000 psi, which is more than enough to break bone. Which is why people who raise horses take so much time training and just like correcting horses when they try to kick or they get easily agitated. And of course, after seeing that gory scene, the police are called and the school recital is put to an end. Now, at the end of the scene, we see that AJ and the doctor hop into this car and speed off, apparently needing to make their way to Twilight ASAP. Now, after the recital got shut down, we see Apple Bloom and Moon are hanging out at this little playground. And based on the fact that Bloom clearly doesn't understand why Bonbon was screaming about ponies turning into monsters before they took her away, this shows that many people still don't know just how bad this outbreak has become, even though it's definitely being like more widely known now. And I think this is why she's so surprised when Moon lets her know that he saw Scoop before she disappeared and that she was saying the same thing as Bonbon. And feeling like Moon has been keeping secrets, Bloom gets upset and storms off into the dark, creepy forest. And to the surprise of no one, they run into this pony here, who I believe to be Seashine. And she looks absolutely terrifying here. And I would say, judging by her size, she's probably at the final stage because she's huge. Unfortunately, we cut away from that scene before we can see what happens with the two kids, but we get to see Twilight, and she is definitely stressing out here because she knows that everyone is depending on her. And then we hear her say, "You've already failed. You failed." And I think that she's referring to the point that so many ponies have already been taken by the mold. But before she can spiral too much, we see that all the ponies arrive at her home, and this is where things start to go bad, because Rarity and Dash don't know just how bad things are, and they're upset at Twilight and AJ for keeping secrets from them. And honestly, I'm kind of on Rarity's side here when she says, "Not telling your friends her family died and pretending like it didn't happen seems like a lie. You traitor." You traitor! This line almost starts a fight because we all know AJ hates being called a liar. But before things can get really out of control, Twilight screams enough and shuts everyone up. After that outburst, she goes ahead and comes clean to the rest of the ponies because even though she thought she would have a cure by now, it's obvious that this outbreak has gotten well out of her control. And to put a point on this, we see that when she begins to speak with Dr. Stable, he reveals what he and Zecora learned earlier in the lab. And basically, this virus does more than just attack the body, it also devours the pony's magic as well. And since this is the first time that Rainbow has heard about all this, she freaks out a bit as well, calling them all monsters for keeping this a secret. And as if there weren't enough secrets going around already, we then see that Pinky steps forward and says that she's been working with Nurse Redheart, which doesn't really mean anything until we see this flashback. Basically, Redheart showed up to Pinky's house back when the outbreak was really ramping up, and she asked her to help her out. But I think Redheart ended up getting more than she bargained for when she brought Pinky on. Basically, Pinky said yes, but then we figure out that she had a whole network of like ponies who had conspiracies about what was going on with this virus, and now that they have confirmation, they basically like started their own little task force. And we see that within Pinky's group, we have Starlight Glimmer, we have Scoot, who looks terrible by the way, but at least she's alive. And I think this may be Trixie right here. And apparently these ponies, as well as a few others, have been working in the shadows trying to protect Ponyville from the infected, while Twilight and the Doctor have been trying to figure out a cure. In the next scene, we see Dash hugging Scoot tightly, not caring if she's infected or not. But after some probing from Twilight, we get to understand what actually happened to her after she was bitten. Basically, instead of going home, Scoot decided to just run out into the forest because she knew that she was going to turn into a monster. But before she could run into the woods, she actually ran into Babs, who was part of Pinky's task force as well, and Babs was basically able to convince Scoot to come with her. She ended up taking her to Redheart's lab, and they were able to cut off her infected leg, but the virus had already spread to stage 2, so they really just took her leg for no reason, if we're being honest. Being frustrated and not wanting to lose any other pony, Trixie used all her magic to try to cure the virus. But unfortunately, the best that she could do was simply slow it down. But it wasn't without a price because she ended up burning out her horn in the process, meaning that she can no longer use magic. And while I think Twilight already knew, this really confirms that magic is not going to be able to save our ponies this time. After that, there seems to be a news story on the TV that reveals that another incident has occurred at the high school. And this, of course, is when Moon and Bloom ran into Seashine. Hearing this, AJ is ready to leave and go make sure that her sister is okay, but Dash is still pissed. Basically asking why AJ didn't tell her that any of this was going on, especially since in this AU, they're a couple. She also tells AJ that if she leaves, they're done. And AJ doesn't even turn around and simply says, I guess we're done then. And while I understand that Dash is mad and AJ has a lot to answer for, especially because she didn't reveal what happened to Sweetie Belle and her mom, I truly don't believe that this was the right call right here. She can't really just expect AJ to sit here and explain this all to her while her sister may be injured or worse. Put what you think down in the comments. Was AJ correct to go ahead and leave and check on her sister? Or do you think Dash was justified in asking her to stay and explain herself? Now, in the final chapter of Cascade, we actually see that Twist and Babseed are able to get to Lily Moon and Apple Bloom in time to save them. But I think the more important part of this chapter is that apparently we have these two ponies here driving this ambulance and taking a pony's body, I assume an infected, over to Dr. Stable in order to get some type of experimentation done. But while they're on the way to him, the body actually starts to move, and to make matters worse, it looks like it even bursts out of his bag and escapes the ambulance. And while we don't actually get to see what this thing is, judging by the fact that the doctor seems to be so afraid of the fact that it escaped, and more importantly, that Princess Luna and Princess Celestia also say it's found us, makes me think that maybe this was patient 0, who would definitely be at level 5 by now. But more importantly, it makes me believe that maybe the princesses had something to do with creating this mode, since it is magical in nature. And this also kind of rings true for me because Celestia says it's time for us to pay for our mistakes. So I feel like these ladies are going to have a lot to answer for coming up. Now, something that I found interesting in this chapter is that Marmar made this chart that basically shows how the ponies feel about each other right now. And as we can see here with Dash, she hates both AJ and Twilight, feeling like they both betrayed their friends. Twilight, on the other hand, may distrust a few people, but she still wants to be friends with everyone, which you can kind of see here by the color coordinations. And this makes me believe that she truly didn't mean to do any harm. We see AJ is pretty much neutral with everyone, and while Dash may hate her, AJ still has a pink line connected to her, showing that she still loves Dash, even though she doesn't trust her right now. Shy still wants to be friends with all the ponies, although she doesn't seem to trust half of them. And Pinky is kind of all over the place, but the most important thing is that she still loves everybody and she still thinks that they're all her friends, even if she does distrust a few of them. The next chapter is called Mutation, and it starts with Twilight revealing that it's been 2 months since the start of this outbreak, and the whole west side of Ponyville has been infected and boarded off. They've also managed to get in touch with Princess Celestia, and her army has come to put a magical barrier around the town to ensure that no one can get in or out. And while most of the ponies are not wanting to speak with Twilight, at least she still has Pinkie Pie and Spike, and they're kind of the only people that are keeping her going in a way. But even though people hate her now, Twilight is still determined to find a cure, and with the help of Dr. Sable and Zecora, they may be making some progress, but it's not looking great, especially since this virus is spreading so quickly. And with that, it has even begun to mutate. Some ponies are becoming mimics, and all this means is that even though they're decaying like the other infected, they still keep their vocal cords and they're able to pretend to be other ponies, leading their victims into traps or areas where they can actually jump them. Other ponies who hunt together are now kind of fusing together, and that mutation is actually called fusion because they just become one being. And the most dangerous one, in my opinion, is the asymptomatic ponies, which means that they still look normal, but they're actually sick. And for my people that may not understand why this is so bad, it would be like having a zombie in your base, but they still look, speak, and act like a regular person, until one day they snap and take a bite out of someone or multiple people. Now, while all these ponies in Ponyville are fighting for their actual lives, we then cut over to this cute scene with Flurry Heart and her little brother Cosmic. She's basically pulling him in his wagon and they're just having a good old time just playing in the castle. Now, while Flurry is running, she slams into the legs of a pony that turns out to be Celestia, who she calls Grimy Tia. But it seems like Celestia is not there just for a casual visit. And while I can't be 100% sure, it seems like she's starting to maybe have a panic attack here. And I'm assuming this is because she's unsure what they can actually do to help the ponies in Ponyville. Speaking of Ponyville, the next chapter takes us back there and we see Rarity is in her home working, but she doesn't really have the spark for fashion anymore because looking nice doesn't really matter when all the ponies are getting sick. And while she's thinking about this, there's a knock on her door, so Rarity picks up a baseball bat with her magic and goes to the door. And once she opens it, she starts swinging, but instead of finding an infected, she finds Twilight standing there. And while Rarity is still a little chilly towards her, she thaws out a lot once Twilight shows up with her lost cat, Opal, having found her in the alleyway. And this opens up a gateway for Twilight to actually get Rarity to help some of the ponies who have had to abandon their homes because their houses are full of mold or infected or prowling around their old neighborhoods. In the final scene, we learn that Twilight has taken a lot of the ponies into her castle because they have nowhere else to go. Even the schools have been shut down, and now all the students are learning are survival skills. But even that may not be enough to save the ponies, because it seems like Twilight had an infected in the basement of her castle, and the mold is now leaching from that pony into the walls of the castle. And this means that eventually they'll even have to evacuate the castle, or else they'll all be infected. And if all that wasn't bad enough, we then see Spike burst through this door, saying that the town hall has been raided as well. It seems like the infected are slowly but surely taking over all of Ponyville. The final chapter shows us more ponies that have fallen victim to the infection, starting with Ivory Pearl and Symphony Melody. And we can see that they got the fusion mutation. This AU then gets even darker, explaining what happened to pregnant ponies who got infected. And basically, the virus doesn't spare anyone. The baby ponies are basically born early and underdeveloped, and there's nothing that the ponies can do to help them, or even themselves at this point. And I think at this moment, I truly understand why Celestia looks like she's having a panic attack here. I believe she and the rest of the ponies are finally starting to realize that this virus isn't something that they're going to be able to get rid of. It has literally been months and nobody has been able to come up with a vaccine or even get close to it. And I think when Dr. Stable said here that this is a world-ending type event, he wasn't being hyperbolic. Now, what I'm hoping though is that Marmar comes back and gives us some more information about how Luna and Celestia are responsible for this, because you can tell that these two definitely have something to do with this mold being created. Either they made it themselves or they unleashed something that actually created it. But as this AU stands right now, this is definitely one of the bleaker ones that we've read, because at the end, it just seems like everybody's going to get infected. Ponyville is basically infested. The only thing that's keeping it somewhat contained are Celestia's soldiers. And as we seen earlier, it seems like at least one of the infected were able to get out of Ponyville before everything locked down. And honestly, I believe that's part of the reason that Celestia went to Cadence, to let her know that her kingdom and the surrounding kingdoms are probably in danger now as well. But hopefully we'll get to see more from Marmar in the future. But with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to check out this video on the screen here. Also, I think Marmar is taking commissions, so you might want to check her out on TikTok or YouTube. Reach out to her and see if she'll draw you something. As always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time with another one. Peace, peace.